A Forbes report alleging Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross grifted more than $120 million from former business partners has been widely slammed for relying heavily on anonymous sources and being laced with petty accusations, raising questions of whether the magazine's Chinese owners were ultimately bashing Ross for his tough pro-American stance in trade talks with Beijing. What struck me as suspicious was the extensive use of anonymous sources. Michael Pillsbury, a Hudson Institute senior fellow who worked in the Reagan and George H.W. Bush administrations, told Newsmax. The majority of Forbes' allegations against Wilbur Ross appear to be from anonymous sources. Anders Kaur, who was fired last year after alleging censorship by Forbes editors over a piece he had written about Hong Kong billionaire Ronnie Chan, did not rule out Chinese influence in the publication's journalism. In my experience at Forbes, some editors had a pro-China bias, perhaps due to Forbes' ownership by a Hong Kong media company, or perhaps due to influential editors and personages at Forbes, who had personal relationships with Hong Kong's billionaire, Ronnie Chan. In 2014, a majority stake in Forbes magazine's parent company, Forbes Media Inc., was acquired by a Hong Kong investment group, Integrated Whale Media, in a transaction valued at $475 million. Forbes magazine, which has championed free markets since its founding in 1917, is headed by former two-time Republican presidential candidate Steve Forbes. It is plausible that this pro-China bias at Forbes translated into a greater willingness to commit investigative resources to what might be perceived as enemies of China, for example members of the Trump administration, Kaur said. The report, by Forbes staffer Dan Alexander, was published August 7 on Forbes.com and was based on interviews over several months with 21 people who know Ross, although not one was identified. It alleged the Commerce Secretary wrongly siphoned or outright stole a few million here and a few million there, and the accusations sparked lawsuits, reimbursements and an SEC fine, and totaled more than $120 million. If even half of the accusations are legitimate, the current United States Secretary of Commerce could rank among the biggest grifters in American history, the report alleged. The report included assertions from two former Ross colleagues who said they saw him taking handfuls of sweetened loaf packets from a nearby restaurant, so he didn't have to go out and buy some for himself. But in the same paragraph, Alexander reported, a Commerce official called the tales petty nonsense, and added that Ross does not put sweetener in his coffee. The most vivid item aimed at smearing Ross' character was the claim he was an alleged thief for stealing sweetened loaf packages from a restaurant, Pillsbury told Newsmax, noting it came from anonymous sources. Pillsbury's latest book is The 100-Year Marathon, China's Secret Strategy to Replace America as the Global Superpower. The Commerce Department immediately ripped Alexander's report, however, saying it was based on false rumors, innuendo, and unverifiable claims. The fact remains that no regulator has made any of these accusations against the secretary, the agency said in a statement. This rehash of old stories is clearly the result of a personal vendetta. The baseless claims made in this store were well publicized long ago and are not news. Reached for comment Thursday, Alexander denied to Newsmax the report smacked of any vendetta against Ross. No, of course not, and he pointed to a 9-post Twitter feed ripping the agency's response. A Forbes spokeswoman also made reference to Alexander's feed in an email to Newsmax. Ross, 80, stepped down last year as CEO of W.L. Ross. The company has been a unit of Invesco Limited, an Atlanta-based investment management company, since 2006. Ross, once a darling of Forbes and a marquee name at many of the publication's global seminars, seemingly has become a target since joining the Trump administration. The U.S. trade talks with China, Ross has taken a hard line, visiting Beijing in May with Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and other Trump administration officials for talks with senior Chinese government personnel. Ross said afterward the countries were pretty far apart on trade, and the administration toughened its position Tuesday by listing $16 billion in Chinese imports that will face 25% tariffs later this month. In July, the White House slapped 25% duties on $34 billion in Beijing goods, and China hit back with tariffs on an equal amount of U.S. products. The month before, Ross announced the administration had fined ZTE Corp., China's No. 2 telecommunications equipment maker, $1 billion in lifting a ban on buying from U.S. suppliers. The move, despite harsh congressional opposition, had allowed ZTE to get back into business. "We think this settlement, which brought the company, a $17 billion company, to its knees, more or less put them out of business, should serve as a very strong deterrent not only for them but for other potential bad actors," Ross told CNBC. Since Integrated Whale took over, Forbes' China coverage has sparked controversy. In February 2016, Core wrote an opinion piece comparing China to North Korea, The Washington Post reports, labeling Chinese President Xi Jinping a dictator, similar to Kim Jong-un. A Forbes editor afterward emailed Core the article contained problematic language, the Post reports, and said likening Xi to a dictator was not accurate. In July 2017, Core wrote a story about Chen, the Hong Kong billionaire who is trustee of the Asia Society, alleging Chinese influence at the New York-based organization. Forbes removed the piece days later, telling the Hong Kong Free Press, "It's standard practice for us to remove articles if we feel there are certain issues, editorial or not, that we need to address." An Asia Society official also told the website it had not been in contact with Forbes about the story in question. Core was then dismissed after alleging censorship on Facebook, accusing Chen of pressuring the magazine to take down the article, the Post reports. The Hong Kong company's purchase seems as if it weakened Forbes' coverage of China, lamented Asia Society senior fellow Isaac Stonefish in the December report in the Post, and serves as a warning lesson for other formerly storied media outlets that might consider Chinese buyers in the future. He then quoted Ray Kwong of the China Institute at the University of Southern California, a former Forbes blogger, who described recent Beijing coverage as disheartening and lame. Newsmax opinion writer Michael Dorstrovitz contributed to this report. Politics. A Forbes report alleging Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross grifted more than $120 million from former business partners has been widely slammed for relying heavily on anonymous sources and being laced with petty accusations. Wilbur Ross, Forbes, grifting, Commerce Secretary, China, Trade War 1107 Tuesday 14 August 2018 11:55 a.m. 2018-55-14 Tuesday 14 August 2018 11:55 a.m. Newsmax Inc. Newsmax Inc. Newsmax Inc.